Salut French learner! Alors, in today's video, we're going to learn plenty of français familier or informal French, as I asked you which TV show I should décortiquer next, and you voted for Plan Cœur, or to give it its English name, The Hookup Plan, a rom-com where two friends hatch a scheme to help their meilleur ami find love. So without further ado, let's jump into it. I'm going to put the subtitles up to help you follow, but do note that they aren't entirely accurate. For the most part, I'll comment on what's really said, as long as my English ears can figure it out. Oh, and stick around until the end because I'll be quizzing you on what we learn in the video. Du coup, si vous êtes prêts, allez, c'est parti.
Bonjour ma chérie. Il est 9h30 mon ange.
Hein?
9h30.
9h30. Oh merde, putain. Papa, je suis tellement à la bourre au taf. Mais pourquoi mon téléphone il a pas sonné?
Alors, there are two things here in this opening clip that I want to draw your attention to. There is, first of all, Elsa says, Je suis tellement à la bourre au taf. Je suis tellement à la bourre au taf. Let's hear it again.
Papa, je suis tellement à la bourre au taf.
Now, two things here. Être à la bourre means être en retard. Être à la bourre means être en retard. And au taf here is because it's à quelque chose, so it's the noun is le taf. Le taf. Taf means le travail, le boulot. Now, if we move a little bit further along into this opening clip, Elsa says, Il arrive à quelle heure ton premier patient?
Il arrive à quelle heure ton premier patient?
Il y a 5 minutes.
Quoi?
Pardon, c'est ma fille. Elle habite à la maison en ce moment.
Bonjour.
Il arrive à quelle heure ton premier patient? Now notice the subtitles do say il arrive quand, but she says il arrive à quelle heure ton premier patient? What time does your first patient arrive? Now I pulled this one up because it's an interesting structure that we don't have in English, or at least one that we don't use very often. They do this a lot in French. She could just say à quelle heure arrive ton premier patient? At what time does your first patient arrive? That's maybe the structure we'd learn in a textbook or in a class, but in everyday French, they're typically going to say that, like, basically a sort of a statement followed by a comma, and then they'll give the subject of the action. So, il arrive à quelle heure? He arrives at what time? Who? Ton premier patient. And they do that a lot. So you could hear it, for example, in another sentence like, C'est qui le type qui me regarde? Who's the guy that's looking at me? But you start with, who is it? C'est qui le type qui me regarde? And maybe another example would be, Il est comment ton burger? Il est comment ton burger? Burger, masculin. So we go with il est in the beginning. Il est comment ton burger? On continue.
Hein? Il est parti avant que t'arrives.
Oui, quoi?
Allez, viens, on va danser. Viens. Il était là. On va danser. Et t'arrêtes de picoler. À 13h, là, le mec, il te mate, regarde.
Ah non, c'est toi qui mates.
Mais n'importe quoi.
Okay, a little bit further along in this episode, and we see the girls at a party. And one of them says, On va danser. Et t'arrêtes de picoler. On va danser. Et t'arrêtes de picoler. Now here I want to draw your attention to the word picoler. Picoler. Now this is a verb that encompasses drinking alcohol, but also drinking a lot of alcohol, getting drunk. All of these things in one word, and it also implies that you're drinking too much. Picoler. Picoler. Et t'arrêtes de picoler. Pretty cool. And then they get onto the dance floor, and she says to Elsa, À 13h, le mec, il te mate. Regarde. I'm pretty sure she says, il te mate. I'll go with the subtitles on this one and say she does say that, but I struggled to hear it, I'll be honest. So, à 13h, le mec, il te mate, regarde. And in the next line, Elsa replies, c'est toi qu'il mate. So here, two forms of this verb, mater. Mater. Now, mater can actually be two things. It can be an informal way of saying regarder, so to look, to watch, right? So, mater un film, you can say that. But in this case, they're using it to say checking you out. He's checking you out. Il mate. So he's looking at you with a romantic intention. Il mate. Il te mate. Du coup, matons le prochain clip.
Et bah alors, moule frite, tu kiffes le kebab, hein? Eh bah oui, comme ta maman. Oui. Allez, entre.
So here we see a few different things, but we'll get to them in a specific order. The first thing is when Charlotte says to her guinea pig, who is called moule frite, tu kiffes le kebab, hein? Tu kiffes le kebab, hein? Now you might notice hein, which is sort of like huh in English, yeah, to sort of reinforce basically the statement, the affirmation that we've just made. And the verb here is kiffer, which is an informal way of saying aimer. Or as she shows it, the strength in her voice, it's sort of like adorer, like tu kiffes le kebab, tu adores le kebab, hein? Kiffer.
Allez, lève-toi. Tu bosses pas aujourd'hui, monsieur Chou?
Hein, quoi?
Tu bosses pas?
Si.
Mais alors?
Attends, il est quelle heure, là?
T'habites à Londres et t'es meilleur pote avec mon frère Antoine. Tu vas bien galérer pour sortir, hein? Va falloir t'attendre qu'il dorme. Ou alors tu passes par le toit.
Par le toit?
Bah ouais. Mais t'as fait comment hier pour venir me voir? Allez, remets-toi en mode furtif.
And then we hear and see 3 forms of this word, which looks like a first name in English, Ben, right? Or maybe it's Benoit in French, but it's not used like that at all. It's the sound ben, which you may have heard a lot in French. And this is actually written B-E-N, ben. Now in the first instance, we hear it as ben alors, moule frite, tu kiffes le kebab, hein? Now here, Charlotte's expressing surprise. Ben alors, moule frite, tu kiffes le kebab, hein? She's expressing surprise with this ben alors. In the second instance, she says to the guy in her room, tu bosses pas aujourd'hui? And then he says, si, like, I am working today. She goes, ben alors, which is basically saying, well then, as in, well, shouldn't you get up? Well then, well, so a second use of ben, and specifically ben alors, is well then. So a lot is communicated through context and then through the tone of voice. And then a third one of just this final sort of 1 minute span of the episode, she says, bah oui, or bah ouais. So in this case, it's of course. Of course, he's like, you want me to leave by the roof? And she says, bah ouais, as in like, there's no other option, you have to do this, otherwise we'll get found out. Bah ouais. So let's just hear those 3 uses of bah one more time.
Et bah alors, moule frite, tu kiffes le kebab, hein? Eh bah oui, comme ta maman. Tu bosses pas?
Si.
Mais alors?
Attends, il est quelle heure, là?
Tu vas bien galérer pour sortir, hein? Va falloir t'attendre qu'il dorme. Ou alors tu passes par le toit.
Par le toit?
Bah ouais. Mais t'as fait comment hier pour venir me voir?
On to the next clip.
Ranger la cuisine, faire la poussière, désinfecter le balai à chiottes. Elle est en pleine nidification, c'est super. Elle est super, tout va bien. On va avoir un bébé. Dans 2 mois, tout redevient comme avant. Allez mec, sois fort.
So here the guy is first of all reading off a list of chores he has to do while his girlfriend or wife is out. His heavily pregnant wife or girlfriend is out. He's reading a list of chores. He's thinking, oh my goodness, things are going crazy. When am I going to get my happy life back again? And he says, tout redevient comme avant. Dans 2 mois, tout redevient comme avant. And I pull this one up because, and I remembered it specifically from the comedian Paul Taylor, French comedian Paul Taylor. He talks about how you get so good at French at some point, or it just becomes so much a part of your everyday that you start translating French literally back to English when you speak English. And he pulled up this example of how he said in English, you rebecome. And he thought it was completely legit English when he was thinking up the name for his comedy show. And I've pulled up the clip here from his show, so take a look, it's really funny.
Until I asked my English mates, I was like, guys, what do you think about the title Rebecoming British? And they said, Paul, rebecoming doesn't exist in English. You're a fucking idiot. Go back to France, you piece of shit. Mais comment ça, ça existe pas en anglais? Parce qu'en français, bah, on devient et ensuite on redevient. So in English, we become and then we become again. No? They're like, no, Paul, in English, we become Elle est à combien cette bière là?
So yeah, basically you can't say rebecome in English, but also you're like, after you've been here a while, you think, but what do I say then? Become again? That doesn't make sense. So go back to being? I think it's basically one of those things, but it doesn't come to you immediately, and that's why I wanted to pull this one up. So the French have this verb redevenir. Redevenir. Quite useful, I think. Okay, on to our next clip, and we get a lovely array of examples of using both the passé composé and the imparfait. And I know these are two past tenses that a lot of you struggle to know which one to use when. That wasn't very good English, but you understood what I meant. Let's have a look.
Vous êtes où? Je peux passer le récupérer?
Je peux vous le déposer aussi. Ça me ferait plaisir de vous revoir.
Parce qu'on s'est déjà vu?
Moi, oui. Je vous ai couru après et vous êtes parti en Uber avec vos copines.
Et comment vous savez laquelle je suis?
Et ben, les autres vous photographiaient avec vos téléphones pendant que vous vomissiez par la fenêtre.
Ah non, je vomissais pas. Je prenais l'air.
Vous étiez ravissante.
So Jules, on the other end of the phone, first gives us two examples of the passé composé. He says, je vous ai couru après et blah blah blah. Vous êtes parti en Uber avec vos copines. Je vous ai couru après, I ran after you. Et vous êtes parti en Uber avec vos copines. You left in an Uber with your girlfriends, with your friends. So here, both these examples are in the passé composé because they're short, completed events that are important to his story that he's telling. This is the rule that we follow that enables us to choose the passé composé here. The two of them follow up with examples of the imparfait in quick succession. So let's listen to that part again.
Et comment vous savez laquelle je suis?
Et ben, les autres vous photographiaient avec vos téléphones pendant que vous vomissiez par la fenêtre.
Ah non, je vomissais pas. Je prenais l'air.
Vous étiez ravissante.
So let's go through them now one by one. Les autres vous photographiez avec votre téléphone pendant que vous vomissiez par la fenêtre. The others were photographing you or were taking photos of you with your phone while you were throwing up, while you were vomiting through the window. So here we use the imparfait because we're talking about two events which were just happening at the time of these other shorter events, i.e. he ran after her and she left in the Uber. So those are the two short events. And these other things were happening in the background. They're more secondary compared with the primary events, at least in his story, at least in that timeline. They're also descriptive events in the background. This is the other rule which enables us to choose the imparfait over the passé composé. So photographier and vomissier. So the verb photographier and vomir. And then Elsa comes back with, ah non, je vomissais pas. Je prenais l'air. So again, we're talking about the same chronology. She then gives us two phrases in the imparfait. Je vomissais pas and je prenais l'air. So when you saw me, when that short thing happened that ended, I wasn't vomiting, I was just getting some air. Je vomissais pas, je prenais l'air. So I hope that gives a little bit of help to some of you out there who are sometimes confused between what to choose between the passé composé and the imparfait. Obviously, I can't go into too much more detail in this quick video, but I hope that clears up some of the confusion. On to the next clip.
C'est peut-être l'homme de ta vie, hein?
Mais non, mais n'importe quoi. Les gars qui draguent comme ça par téléphone, c'est des boudins. Bah oui, forcément, sinon ils se serviraient pas du téléphone. Je m'y connais.
Les gars qui draguent comme ça par téléphone is the first thing I want to draw your attention to here. Les gars qui draguent. Now, les gars is les garçons, right? Qui draguent. Drague is the verb draguer, and it means to hit on or to try and seduce someone. In this case, a guy trying to seduce a girl, as far as she knows. Draguer, conjugated with the third person plural. Les gars qui draguent comme ça par téléphone. And then she follows up by saying bah oui, so that word bah again, to sort of reaffirm what she said. Of course, like bah oui, of course. Forcément. Sinon, il se servirait pas du téléphone. Now, if you watched my video last week all about the verb utiliser and some words you can use to add some variety, you'll remember I used the word se servir. So she's used it here. They wouldn't use the phone. Il se servirait pas du téléphone. Il se servirait pas du téléphone. And she finishes with je m'y connais. Je m'y connais. Now, I've also talked about this use of connaître, pretty advanced, but I hear it from time to time, and it's a useful one to know as you get better at French. I've mentioned this in the video all about savoir and connaître, those two verbs for to know in French. So, je m'y connais basically is like, trust me, I know my stuff. I know what I'm talking about in this area. Je m'y connais. In this area being flirting, seduction. Ensuite, quel est le clip suivant?
Ok, c'est toi le boss. Qu'est-ce que tu veux savoir?
Ben, ce que tu fais dans la vie.
Je suis prof.
Ah bon? Ah, parce que t'as pas du tout le physique, hein.
Ah non, mais je te rassure, je suis juste instit. Non, parce qu'au-dessus de 7 ans, moi, intellectuellement, je suis dépassé. Non, mais c'est une blague, hein.
Ah,
Exactement.
non, mais j'ai...
Okay, so now Jules and Elsa are on a date, and he tells her that he is a teacher. Je suis prof. And then she's like, no, you don't have the physique, the physical appearance of you don't look like a teacher at all. And he's like, je te rassure, je suis juste instit. So like, let me reassure you, like, I understand where you're coming from. Je suis juste instit. Now, I had to look this word up, and it's an abbreviation of the verb instituteur, the male form, or institutrice for the female form. Now, instit, this is the title of a teacher for primary school, for young children. So he's basically saying, yep, I don't look like a teacher, but don't worry, I only teach young kids. And then he follows up by saying, au-dessus de 7 ans, moi, intellectuellement, je suis dépassé. There's a few things here. So, au-dessus de, au-dessus, you might think of the physical preposition. You're sort of holding something above something else. Now, I know it can be confusing to choose between sur and au-dessus. Sur is when you make contact with the surface of the thing. So, my hand is on my hand here. Ma main droite est sur ma main gauche, but ma main droite est au-dessus de ma main gauche. When it's above, it's not making contact. But you can also use it in things in things in a chronology, in a temporal sense. He says au-dessus de 7 ans. So above 7 years old, above the age of 7, I'm intellectually out of my depth. So dépassé means out of one's depth or in over one's head. So he was making a little joke there. Elsa didn't really understand it, and she's like, oh, I really thought you were an idiot. Tu étais con. Anyway, let's look at our final clip of the episode. Lots of juicy things in here.
C'est folle. Charlotte, regarde-moi. Oh, non mais les bouchons, c'est la merde, hein. Charlotte, retourne-toi. Quoi? Balance le dos. Quelle douce? Tu fais ta tête de fouine, là. Tu me caches un truc.
So in this taxi ride, Emily, or Milou, says to Charlotte, balance le dos. Balance le dos. Now, as an expression, I would translate this to dish the dirt. Like, what are you hiding from me? Dish the dirt, dish the gossip, right? But balancer is a cool verb. It basically means to spill the beans, just to say what sort of secret you may have. Or it could also be to sort of snitch on someone, to grass someone up, to hand someone over, to tell someone the secret of someone else. Could be used in a criminal sense or just in a gossipy sense like this between friends. So balance le dos, and le dos is almost certainly an abbreviation of le dossier. A dossier is a folder or a collection of information or papers that you would use, and so in this sense we're using it to imagine that it's a pile of information or gossip that needs to be shared, right? Balance le dos. And she goes, quel dos?
T'es furtive là, je sens.
Tu m'as inspiré un coup de génie.
À toi, un coup de génie. D'accord, tu me fais très peur.
Then we have un coup de génie. Un coup de génie. Tu m'as inspiré un coup de génie. Now here's a useful structure that you can reuse with lots and lots of nouns. You say un coup de plus the noun you want to use, because un coup is like a hit, a stroke, a dose, something like that. So un coup de génie is a stroke of genius, a stroke of genius. Really, really useful, this structure. Bon va, je pense qu'on va s'arrêter là. Hein? C'est parti pour le quiz, mesdames et messieurs. Tell me the answers to the following questions down in the comments to see how much you learned from today's video. Numéro 1 is, what is a casual way to say regarder un film? That can also be used to say that someone is checking someone out. Numéro 2, Which word whose spelling resembles a first name can be added at the start of a sentence to express surprise? Et numéro 3, how could you translate un coup de chance in English? Un coup de chance. Voilà, j'ai hâte de lire vos réponses dans les commentaires ci-dessous. I hope you enjoyed this video as much as I enjoyed making it. Leave me a like on the video if you did. It really helps me out and lets me share my videos with a wider audience. Until next time, passez une très bonne journée ou soirée. Ciao, ciao, French learner.